Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning. Morning. Everybody's doing well this morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. We may have a few other folks join the call, but we want to go ahead and get started because we've got some great stuff going on today. Great speaker in Rebecca. So I'm just going to kind of kick us off here. I'm Jessica with the Community Foundation. For those who don't know me, welcome to our fourth nonprofit listening session on Zoom. I think on this fourth one, we may finally have technology relatively well set, but thanks for bearing with me throughout. So here's what we're going to do today.
Hello.
Main speaker is Rebecca Moore with New River Valley Community Services. Many of you have probably heard Rebecca talk at a variety of different events. She does a great job of being out and about in the community to do trainings and to talk about a variety of different mental and emotional health issues. So we're really excited to have her with us today. So that's going to be the majority of our talk today. And then we will do just a little bit of business at the end, talking about where you can find a recording of this particular call, as well as our past nonprofit listening sessions, what we're going to be doing going forward, and then also some opportunities to share your agency's particular needs with the broader community. So just a couple notes as we get started. If you're not speaking, just mute your mic so that we don't get background noise or anything. I know I've had several times where kids are running through the background with me, so just make sure you're muting your mic so we can hear Rebecca real well. We're going to use the chat feature, so if you have questions or comments, go ahead and put those in the chat. We will kind of monitor that throughout and focus our questions primarily at the end for Rebecca, but just make sure you put those in there for now so you don't forget them, but we also make sure that we get to them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Moore. As I said, Rebecca's with New River Valley Community Services. She's the Integrative Health Liaison, as well as a trauma-informed trainer. She's been doing great work in the New River Valley, and she's going to talk through addressing mental and emotional health, stress, etc. during COVID-19. So Rebecca, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then you just tell me when you want to advance some slides.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing okay this morning. It is a very early, rainy day, once again. So we're going to talk a little bit today about both children and adults and what this time and this stress can look like for both kids and adults, and then hopefully have some takeaways of what we can do to support our children, but what we can also do to help take care of ourselves and our peers and our friends and our loved ones as we're going through this time of great uncertainty and never-ending change. Okay, Jessica, if you want to change the slide. Okay. So I like to start it off with just taking a moment to recognize, you know, as Jessica mentioned, I am a trauma-informed care trainer, so we like to look through everything from the lens of being trauma-informed. Just as a quick refresher update, you know, I'm sure you guys have heard this before, but what is trauma? It's something that happens from an event or a series of events or a set of circumstances that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and it has lasting long-term effects on their functioning. It could be mental, physical, social, emotional, spiritual well-being. The reason that I bring it up is because what we're encountering right now is a traumatic event. It's a traumatic event on a societal level because everybody is experiencing pervasive loss. If you look at the bottom of the slide, you can see that, you know, really what it gets down to is that trauma's loss of many, many different things. It could be boundaries, feelings of power and control, attachment, feelings of safety or protection, feeling of innocence, loss of trust, loss of your possessions, consistency and predictability, sense of self or body image. And so when we really look at what we've been going through the past several months with the pandemic, we hit several of those things. You know, we hit feeling a loss of safety. We feel a loss of protection, and how do we keep ourselves safe and our loved ones safe? You know, for the children, sometimes this is a loss of innocence and thinking that everything was always going to be okay in the world, and maybe that's not the case. A loss of trust. Who do we trust? Who do we get information from? Do we feel like we're getting good information? Oftentimes, information's changing so quickly, it's hard to feel that you're getting accurate information at all times. Consistency and predictability, gone. Been gone for a long time. So I think it's really important to note and honor the fact that what people are experiencing right now can be very traumatic, and this could be a traumatic event that you see long-term effects that do impact mental health, physical health, spiritual health, emotional well-being. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, and know that that is a piece and a component to what we're going through right now. Okay, next. When we talk about children and supporting children and how kids are responding, there's some factors to keep in mind. Number one, age of the child. A way that an infant responds to this is going to be very, very different than a way that an early elementary school child or a middle school child or even a high school young adult may respond. Other things to think about are what are some natural supports that the family has. And when I say natural supports, what that means is we look at not paid providers. So we look at who do they have outside of individuals like a therapist or a case manager or a teacher. You know, people who are not necessarily there if they're not being paid to be there. So do they have family members? Do they have a church group that they're tied into? Do they have, you know, friends and neighbors that they feel close to? What type of economic supports do they have? Are they able to pay their bills? Are they able to get necessities? Are they able to have food on the table right now? The other thing to think about for children is what were their coping styles prior to the pandemic? So did children have a good foundation for dealing with difficult things, with dealing with tough times? Oftentimes, that's not necessarily the case because children are in process of learning those things. As adults, we teach children how to deal with tough stuff. We teach children how to have resiliency skills. We help them with learning how to have tolerance for those tough feelings. And so did they have any of that built in prior to this? Did they not have that built in prior to this? We also look at, like I mentioned before, resiliency skills. What are the skills that they have that help them bounce back from tough times? Oftentimes, these are things that we pick up as we go through life. We pick them up from our family. We pick them up from school and adults that we have there. We pick them up from mentors or other individuals that help support us through difficult things. They are skills. So oftentimes younger children are not going to have as many skills maybe as older children, but that's not always the case depending on what those family systems look like and how able the family system is to support the child. We also look at, did they have any other previously diagnosed mental health issues? Did they have a tendency to feel very anxious when things were tough? Did they have a tendency to have a depressed mood, or did they have a tendency to be very oppositional or defiant when they were going through really tough things? And then we also want to look at what are their access to resources. So maybe things aren't going so well, maybe children are having a difficult time, but do they have access to the resources that they need to support themselves? So if we look at all of those things, those are all factors we really want to think about when we're looking at or trying to predict how children are going to respond to what's going on right now. Okay, we can go forward. I like to point out some of the common trends. They're not much different from us as adults. We're all people, we're all experiencing the same thing. So oftentimes our reactions look very similar. Across the board, and one of my counterparts who I work with at the PEDS office did a presentation with me the other week, Dr. Mogan, and she did a really nice job of describing some of the things also that they're seeing at the pediatric office. And a lot of that is also what we're seeing in the mental health field with increased anxiety, increased worry. What is going to happen? Am I going to get sick? What happens if I get sick? What happens to you if you get sick? Mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or whoever the caretaker is. Looking at, am I ever going to go back to school? Will I get to play with my friends again? There's all these types of just general anxiety because they're not really quite sure what might happen. In addition to that, there's also increased fear. And what I like to point out with increased fear is that can look really, really different depending on the individual. Fear can look like anxiety. It can legitimately just look like I'm scared. I have trouble articulating what's going on. I'm having panic attacks. I'm having bad dreams. I'm having nightmares. Or, I'm breaking out in hives, or maybe having some of those more physically somatic symptoms. The other side of fear can look like anger. And so that can look like that irritability, constantly biting, or, just being, when I say biting more, I mean more in the temperamental sense of very reactive to things and quick to throw temper tantrums or yell at people or get angry or curse or stomp off. You may see an increase in tantrums, and you may just see an overall shutting down, especially with older kids. So just keep in mind that fear can come across many different ways. As adults, we've seen it in the media in a lot of different ways. You see, people protesting, you see people refusing to follow guidelines, or people, physically attacking other people because they get angry that someone else, might be trying to ask them to do something that they don't feel comfortable doing. So it's not, we see it across the spectrum, and it's really hard to recognize that underneath that anger is actually something very, very different that's going on. With the kids, a lot of times we're seeing an increase in behavioral problems. Some of this is also due to disruption in routine. As humans, we function really well with knowing what to expect and having some kind of built-in routine. And for many people, that has completely gone out the window. There's not school, so there's not the transition that they were used to of going to somewhere else to learn and have that set up and have their friends and have the teachers and have that type of structure. And a lot of times parents are at home working, and it really is an extremely difficult job to try to balance work and school and people's emotions and trying to manage all of that day in and day out. And so a lot of times you see an increase in behavioral problems just because they don't know how to interpret and cope with that change. You might see a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. I don't understand what's happening, what's going on. Difficulty with transitions in general. So if you notice that you're trying to maybe start something new in the home, or you are trying to take them somewhere, they may not adapt to that as easily as they once did before, just because their basic routine has been so disrupted. I put trouble learning and retaining new information. And you may notice this if you're trying to do some at-home schooling. You may also notice this if you're just asking them to do basic things, or to teach them some new tasks to help out around the house. What we know about the brain and trauma and toxic stress is that when the brain is under stress, it's not primed for learning. It's primed to survive. And so oftentimes when we're trying to bring in new information, build new skills, learn new things, our brains really struggle to adapt to that, because there's not a lot of space, if you will, to have the experience to learn and retain, and then be able to process and spit back new information. The same goes with children. That's oftentimes why you see a lot of difficulty in school if children are experiencing trauma or toxic stress. So same thing going on right now. And then changes in typical behavior. There's been an increase in bedwetting, in regression for a lot of younger children. Maybe they were potty trained and now they're not potty trained anymore. Night terrors, disruption in sleep schedules, either sleeping more, sleeping less, having trouble calming down. You may notice difficulty eating more than usual, increase in energy, decrease in energy, maybe wanting more comfort or attachment. You may see, children, if a caretaker leaves the room, child follows, or an older child just wants to kind of come sit with you. And maybe that's a change from before, but they're just looking for that comfort. They're looking for that attachment. And then you may also see an increase in isolation of just wanting to be left alone. And I don't want to be bothered. Don't talk to me. Don't come near me. So I say all of that to basically say anything's normal. There's a lot going on. People cope in many, many different ways. There's no one right way to cope and deal with things. But, you know, anything or any shift that you see in your child or in another child, or that you hear about with a child, you can probably bet that that's a presentation of how they're interpreting and coping with what's going on right now. Okay. So for adults, you can go to the next one. A big thing that I want to talk about is stress, because stress is really sort of that offshoot of what really starts to impact us and impact our well-being. Right now, we have 500,000 million different ways to feel stressed. A big one is we're taking on multiple roles. Oftentimes, parents are asked now to be a teacher, to be an employee. You're a spouse, you're a parent, you're a caretaker. You know, there's so many different things that we're being asked to do at the same time. And that is a really stressful task. And you can guarantee that you are never going to be able to do 100% at everything that you're asked to do at the same time. I've often said to my friends, I kind of laugh about it and say, I'm either a great coworker or a great employee, or I'm a great teacher, or I'm a great parent, or I'm a great caretaker of the pets. Like, I can't, it's just not possible to balance everything. There's ongoing changes. We have changes to policies that sometimes are happening on a daily basis because things are changing so rapidly. There's ongoing changes in information that we're getting, because to be fair, this is something brand new that even the experts have never seen. And so they're learning and discovering new things, which then changes the information that we receive. There's changes in practices of what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what's helpful, what's not helpful, where you can go, where you can't go. So it's really just kind of endless if we're not able to filter some of it. We often have less access to resources that we had once to our disposal. Some daycares have had to shut down. Churches are just now starting to open. Yes, they've been available over internet, but that's a big support for a lot of people. And that was not necessarily something that people could go to access. Schools have shut down. So, having a place for people to go is not necessarily there. There's some financial concerns that people are having, especially if people have lost jobs, and there has been some assistance with the government with stimulus support. However, it doesn't last forever, and so that does cause a lot of concern for people. And there are lots of families who just lack financial stability in general, and so this is something that will exacerbate that, which can really cause a lot of stress and strain on the adults in the family system. And then, another big one that a lot of people have is just health and safety. How do I keep myself safe? How do I keep myself healthy? How do I also keep my children healthy? So when you bundle this all together, it can be a significant amount of stress and strain emotionally on adults in the family system. Okay, go ahead. Let's do this. I'm going to have you go, Jessica. I'm going to have you go one more slide, and then I'll have you come back to this one. I did not do a great job of putting that in order. So something I wanted to point out when we're talking about stress is that there's different types of stress. Even on a good day when we don't have a pandemic going on, we are typically encountering some type of stress. And not all stress is negative. Stress is something that helps us move forward. It helps create change. It helps push us and motivate us at times. An easy example of that is if you think about exercise. We are putting stress and strain on the body, but we're doing it and it is improving the health of our body in the long run. There's also positive stressors such as buying a new home, or marriage, or the birth of a new baby, or getting a pet and adding to the family system. Those are all things that bring us a lot of joy, that are really exciting, that are positive. It's also a time of change, so it also creates stress. However, typically those are the types of stress that there's a positive outcome attached to it. So we move through it, we don't stay stuck in it. Then there's tolerable stress, which sometimes that can be pretty significant events that are going on, but it's the stress responses within our body are temporary. So all of the cortisol and the adrenaline and all of the stress hormones that are being excreted to help help your body maintain through that period don't go on for a long-term period of time. So it's not necessarily creating a longer lasting negative effect on your body's health. And oftentimes if we have supportive relationships, we're able to also move through that stress and navigate it in a way that's a little bit healthier for us. Where we really get into a problem zone and where we start talking about trauma and we start talking about lasting long-term effects is when we get into toxic stress. And, you know, this can also, this time of the pandemic can also be considered that because we have several months now that we've been going on where we've really been working on adjusting and getting used to new things. And there's constant stressors. And if we don't have those supportive relationships or other buffers, you can see some of the effects of that toxic stress. You know, if it goes on long enough, you can start to see things thematically like adrenal fatigue, where literally your stress hormone system has just been used up and you're no longer able to function. You can things like tension headaches and you know, increase in blood pressure or inability to function and oversleeping and all of the things that we see our body shift when we get into places where we've had stress for such a long period of time, that coping and managing is no longer something that we're able to do. And so we really want to just be monitoring ourselves as adults and caretakers to really recognize where we're at with our level of stress. Because if we get into that toxic level, it impacts us, which then also impacts everybody around us and our ability to manage and help support the children and the other people that we may need to support in our lives. Okay, go to the next slide, and then I'll have you go back to that grief slide. Okay. This is something that you guys can kind of keep in mind when we talk about our body's response to stress is the general adaptation syndrome. So we start out, you know, in good health. It's kind of our homeostasis where we sit. Something happens and our body goes into what we call the alarm stage. So it's sort of like, you know, you press that alarm system and your body goes on high alert. Like, wait a minute, something's shifting, something's happening. Let me prime myself to be able to react if I need to. As that stress continues, you may hit the resistance stage. And that's where your body is now sitting in the stress for a little bit longer and it's starting to have difficulty coping. If that doesn't shift, you end up in what's called the exhaustion stage. And that's literally where your body starts to break down. You start to have burnout. You're not able to function. And so because of that, you know, that's where you can start to see an increase in health issues. You may not be functioning at work, may not be functioning in the home. So it's just something to keep in mind that when we talk about good health and bad stress and the continuum and the line that it impacts us at, it's really helpful to kind of check in and see where you may be at on that line, because we all are on that line at some point, at some stage in our life. However, it often fluctuates and we're able to manage and control that depending on the support that we have. Okay, if you go back 2 slides. Perfect. Oh, hold on one second. I have a child that's talking to me. What? Yes. Love you. Okay. So, Ava, I'm sorry. Hello. All right, go up. I'm doing training. Bye. All right, thank you. There you go, working from home. It's great. Okay. A big thing that I've really touched on with a lot of my colleagues and a lot of people that I work with and other partners in the area is really being able to acknowledge for people, for children, for adults alike, is that trauma equals loss. And right now, we are really going through the grief process. For those of you that aren't familiar with it, there's 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. It's not a linear process. Oftentimes we fluctuate, as you can see in the picture on there. There's many fluctuations between different stages. There's no timeline to navigate through them. But really, the grief that we're experiencing collectively is just the loss of normal. You know, we had what we once considered normal. We had what we once considered just life and what we expected life to look like. And literally within a week's time period, that completely shifted and changed. And that's really, really hard. And so it's important to honor and acknowledge the fact that because of that profound loss of knowing what to anticipate and knowing what quote unquote normal felt like, that there is a grief process that comes along with that, just with any other loss we experience in life. So, you may find people, denying, oh, this isn't really happening, and oh no, life is good, and oh, it's okay. And then all of a sudden becoming really angry that I can't do the things that I used to do. I'm so frustrated at being stuck, in the home and not being able to access things. That bargaining stage of, well, maybe this will get better. If we can do that, then this is what's going to happen. And then also, the depression that comes along with that of this is really sad and this is really hard and I don't know how to handle this. And maybe sometimes of just completely shutting down and having days where you just feel like you're not functioning at all. And then at times an acceptance of it, of like, okay, so we now have to redefine what life is going to look like, and we're going to be okay. And let's work together as a family, or let's work together as friends or peers to figure out what that might look like. So keep that in mind as you go through your days. Just knowing that if you have these random feelings and emotions that come up, it is because of the grief process, and that it doesn't look linear. And so it does ping pong around quite often. Okay, you can go 2 forward. Next. And one more. Okay, real quick, as I said before, body's response to stress, things to think about when we are feeling stress. Oftentimes we have difficulty with memory. So if you find yourself being really forgetful, you can probably link that to stress. Trouble learning and figuring out new things, which has really been a challenge lately since everything we're doing is completely new. Telehealth, one of them, doing web things, trying to figure out and navigate all those systems. It is important to know that when we have really, really high levels of stress and they're chronic, it does impact our immune system, and it impacts our ability to stay healthy. It impacts our ability to fight off colds or general health issues. Difficulty focusing and concentrating. You may find yourself just kind of wandering or not being able to stay on track with conversations or TV shows or books or anything really that you're doing. Troubles with it can impact executive functioning or problem solving, something that maybe you felt like wasn't very difficult to figure out before. You might just feel like it's completely overwhelming one day, just depending on what's going on. And then, we also know that prolonged stress can really change our brain's makeup and just our basic ability to adapt to new things and adapt to surroundings. Okay, next. So the question is, what do we do? Like, how can we help? So with children, I focus on 3 main things: transparency, resiliency, skill building, and self-care. You go to the next one. And so what does that mean? So with transparency, it is important that we're able to have conversations with children. They have questions. They know that things are going on. They're hearing things, whether it be on the TV, whether it be adults that are talking to one another, whether it be their friends that are talking to each other because of things that their friends have heard. So, it is hard because we have a lot of things that are going on. But if we can carve out 5, 10, 15 minutes to really just sit and be present and provide a space for children to ask questions, and have age-appropriate conversations, it can be extremely comforting and go a long way in helping them to feel like they're able to cope with what's going on. I like to point out it's okay to not have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. And so if you don't know the answer to something, it is okay to say, you know what, I don't have the answer for that right now, but I will do my best to figure that out. Or maybe we can ask somebody, or maybe we can look that up and see. Or to just provide that general comfort of, I don't know the answer. I'm not really sure what's going to happen, but I can promise you that I'm going to be here with you, and we will talk about things, and we will have a plan if we need to for whatever might come up. And then identify ways that you're working as a household to stay safe and take care of each other. My littlest one, which you guys just saw, asked one day, what happens if you get sick, or what happens if we get sick? Like, what does that feel like? And what might we do? And so we just really talked about, here's some possibilities. We don't know if that was what would happen, but if I were to get sick, or if somebody else were to get sick, here's how we're going to take care of each other. Here's how we're going to handle that. Okay, next. I talked a little bit in the beginning about, things to keep in mind. And one of those things was resiliency skills. And resiliency skills are so important to helping us get through tough stuff. It's kind of our buffer, if you will. And the beautiful thing is you can learn resiliency. You can teach resiliency. But it's easy, as simple as some of the things that I have on the slide, like creating routines and predictability as much as possible. Having consistency where you can in the house, identifying things that you can control versus things that you can't. So productive versus unproductive worry. Modeling behaviors for your children. If you're having a really tough day, showing them it's okay to have tough days. It's okay to express your feelings. Of course, we want to do it respectfully and we want to do it with love and kindness. But if you're having a tough time, talk about it. That's okay. We don't have to be perfect every day. We don't have to have it all together every day. Teach and communicate emotions. A lot of times, people don't have the language for how they're feeling. So it can go a long way to just teaching, this is what this feeling is, and this is how it might feel. And this is how your body's communicating to you that you're feeling that. And I see that. And so let's talk about, how we can help you with that. Creating support systems and then utilizing them when needed. So as adults, we need support systems to help us with things. Children also need that. So helping them realize, who do you have for support, or who can you go to if you need a hug or you need to talk to somebody, or maybe you just want to play. Can we do a play date on FaceTime, or, reach out to some of your friends and maybe write letters or do different things to help create that support system for you. And then looking at roles and responsibilities in the home so that everybody's helping the household function and everybody feels purposeful and everybody feels like they're contributing. Okay, next. And the last one's self-care. And you're going to see me talk about this with adults here in a minute also, but it's just as important for children to help them learn self-care. A big thing that we've done in our house at times is I have 2 children. And so oftentimes they get along really, really well. And then sometimes, because we're all around each other all the time, it's like WWE in my house. And so there are times that we literally have to say, okay, everybody take 5 minutes. Everybody go to your room, find something that's a quiet activity that you can do by yourself to just take a break. Really helping them to be aware and teaching them awareness for how are you feeling, and are you starting to get really stressed, or have you had too much of each other, and do you just need space right now? Looking at balance, how are we balancing our time with each other and our expectations with each other? And then, looking at how do we also incorporate other things that are helpful for ourselves? Teaching them how to connect and where they can connect. A good they can be, coloring activities, or like slime or goop, or favorite blanket, or a favorite book, or a favorite stuffed animal, maybe some Legos or some other things that can help occupy them, or things that they really enjoy doing that can be soothing. And also as adults, once again, it comes back to modeling, and how are we modeling the importance of taking care of ourselves and doing things that are nurturing for ourselves. Because, children are like little sponges. They'll watch us and they'll do what they see. And so I think that that's something that's really helpful as parents to think about, because a lot of times we'll feel really guilty of, oh my gosh, like I just need to take 30 minutes to go do something for myself. But especially when we are all inundated with each other and work, and it is all central to one location, it really is essential that we are modeling for them that it is okay to take breaks. It's okay to say, I need 5 minutes to myself. It's okay to pick up a book. It's okay to say, you are important to me and this is important to me. Just give me a second so that I can get myself refocused, and I'll be right back so that we can sit together and have a conversation or do whatever it is we need to do. Keep expectations reasonable. This will save everybody in the home. It will not only save your own sanity, but it will help with with your children. As I said before, balancing everything that we have going on right now, it seems sometimes like an insurmountable task. And so just knowing that even school at home, it may be much shorter than what they're used to as far as going to school. However, they're learning in a totally new environment where maybe home, what I learned with my two children is home is associated with fun. Like yes, there might be homework, but really this was the fun place. Like this is where we got to play and we got to watch TV and we got to hang with our friends. We didn't have, 4 hours of school that we had to sit down and do. I wasn't expected to have to do all of this work. And so it was a big transition of saying, I know you're used to this, but now we also have to incorporate this part of our lives at home. And look, let's get through this and then we'll take a break. And then let's get through this and we'll take a break. And then let's do this and we'll take a break. I don't expect you to do everything right now, but we do need to get it done by this day, by the end of the day. So keeping expectations reasonable, not expecting perfection, knowing that at times things are going to be great. And then knowing at other times things are not going to be great. And then really be careful and monitor media exposure. Kids have these like supersonic ears and can hear all kinds of things that we don't always know that they're hearing. And maybe the other thing is too, a lot of times kids will get on their TVs and watch YouTube videos. And the YouTube videos often will just kind of go to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And the next thing you know, they're watching something that was totally not age appropriate for them, but they didn't necessarily seek that out. So just really being cognizant of what they're watching and what they're hearing, and what's playing in the background when they're around can be really helpful so that they're not picking up little bits and pieces of information and then coming to some really interesting self-conclusion about what that might mean. Okay, next. So then looking at how we're going to take care of ourselves as adults, what's that going to look like? When we talk about self-care, the definition, really, really focus on the fact that it's activities that we take on with the intention of enhancing energy, restoring health, and reducing stress. So you hear people talk about self-care a whole lot, but I think the one takeaway, if you take away anything, is that it is a very intentional activity. So it's not just like, okay, I'm going to eat well, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to go to sleep, but it's really being intentional that this is why I'm doing something. I'm doing it to nurture this part of myself right now. And I'm really going to focus on that as I do this activity versus just doing it and not being mindful while you're doing it. Okay, next. Control and worry. During uncertainty, it's normal to feel fear, have anxiety, and worry. I talked earlier about practical worry and hypothetical worry. You'll see there's a link there to a YouTube video that does a really nice job of highlighting the differences between practical worry and hypothetical worry. But to break it down simply, practical are things that you can actually control and do something about. Hypothetical are things that are out of your control. Much more helpful to invest your time and energy into the worry and that you can control and things that you can do something about, but also acknowledging it and then doing your best to try to let that go. It's easy right now in these times to project to the worst case scenario, which is always going to create additional stress. So my big emphasis is really trying to take things one day at a time, even breaking it down if needed sometimes to like 5 minutes at a time, just depending on what your day is looking at and how you're feeling in a particular day. Okay, next. So this gives you a real quick rundown of practical versus hypothetical. So you can control taking precautions for yourself and your family, the attitude you bring to work, how much time you expose yourself to the news, how you respond, and what you contribute. You can't control the virus. You can't control work in general. You can't control the news or how others behave or outcomes. If you look at the can control thing, those are all things that you can actually do yourself. So just keep that in mind. Okay, next. Take inventory of your resources, emotionally, mentally, socially, financially, spiritually, and physically. How you're feeling. Are you getting your needs addressed? Do you feel connected? Do you feel secure financially? Do you feel connected to something bigger than yourself? Are you eating well? Are you able to move your body? How are you sleeping? How are you managing stress? So really just taking that inventory as you go through those self-care processes. And next. And if needed, this is always something that we emphasize: reach out for help. There are people out there to help you. We have wonderful resources here in the New River Valley. We have people to help support children, help support families. We have all kinds of things. And Jessica's going to send it out later. I have a worksheet that I created that I'm emailing to her that has all kinds of resources on it. But, you know, we have access to food banks and food resources. We have access to counseling resources, family resources, parenting resources. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, or if you're feeling like you just don't know, you know, where to turn, feel free, you know, tap into those resources and take advantage of them. And I think that's the last slide.
I think so. Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was fantastic.
You're welcome.
So folks, we've got some time for questions. You're welcome to put those in the chat. We're a relatively small group, so if you prefer, you can unmute as well and ask those questions. But what questions does you all have for Rebecca? This was a really great overview, and certainly helpful, at least for me, both as a parent and as an individual. Questions anyone has for Rebecca? Watching.
And you're welcome to email me if you guys think of something later on, or you have questions about access or things like that.
Yeah. Rebecca, I guess my question would be, are you seeing any certain trends from what you all are seeing at NRV Community Services, certain things that, you know, you're more trouble you're seeing either from families or from individuals, and things that we might want to be aware of?
Yeah, so things, I mean, from a mental health standpoint, at least, some things that we are seeing, and these are things that we knew, or at least we're able to kind of think about and project ahead of time, is that unfortunately, increases in overdose, increase of substance use. I don't necessarily know trends, or we haven't had the ability yet to see if there's increase, but we obviously have a lot of concern of increase of abuse and domestic violence. But I know we've already gotten some information and some actual data back about increase in overdose and substance use in the area and in the state. And I think what that ends up reflecting is you know, people's coping strategies and feeling really overwhelmed, and so behaviors and things that people engaged in before are happening. They're happening at a elevated level at times. You know, and so I think that's where we talk about support being so helpful. And I know at the PEDS office, definitely just some regression in behaviors, and children that maybe were doing really, really well, having a lot of difficulty again. And so really helping families sort of understand and be flexible with everything that's going on, and know that it's not anyone's fault. It's just a response to what's happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So Sarah has a question regarding kind of the levels of stress. And so Sarah, why don't you go ahead and ask your question while I go back to that slide for you. It was on, hold on, I'm making my way back. Is it, Sarah,
Yes,
this one
that
is
slide.
Perfect. Yeah.
Pardon
So
me.
go ahead and ask your question, Sarah.
So my question is, you know, for a well-balanced, healthy adult, are we supposed to stay only in the green? Is it even practical that we can stay in the green? Or if we can manage just staying in the green and yellow, that's about as ideal as we can? Or is there an ideal?
Ideally, I think we'd all love to be in the green all the time. I think practically speaking, there's no way that's going to happen all the time. And I think if you can think about your life as a whole, we can all identify times that we've been doing really well, feeling like we're functioning really well. And health is good, feeling good, coping well, we're in that green. Maybe and because there's always little stressors that come up. There's always little things that happen. So I think it's really normal for most people to stay within that yellow, greenish stage, especially with the line of work that we do. You know, we work with populations that experience a lot of stress, ergo we feel a lot of stress from that, in addition to just doing daily life things and being split in a lot of different roles on a normal day. And then you can probably also think through your life about other times when a lot of things have piled on and you've found yourself going into stage 2 and stage 3. And the nice thing about the human body is that we are extremely adaptable. And so we rebound between these stages and fluctuate. So even if you find yourself in a stage 2 or stage 3, it's more about noticing you're there and what can you do to take care of yourself to get back to stage 1 or to the green good health phase. Does that make sense?
Yes. Are there any pointers on how to help yourself notice that resistance drop and increase in number 1 so that you don't, so that we can start training ourselves to stay away from 2 and 3 if we're lucky enough to be able to do that?
I think the biggest part of that is just self-awareness, knowing number 1, what are triggers for you? What are things that are really difficult for you to balance and deal with? Because that's going to look different for everybody. The next thing is, how does your body respond to stress? How do you know when you're feeling stress? Because oftentimes our body will give us signals before we're cognizant of it mentally. And so finding those trends and patterns within yourself, could it be tension headaches? Could it be stomach problems? Could it be certain areas of your body where muscles tense up? Could it be, back issues? There's all kinds of different somatic symptoms that people might experience that are indicators that you're experiencing stress. And so maybe that's a time to pause and check in with what's going on around you to see where you can decrease that or increase your support.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a question from Marcia as well. And Marcia, I'm going to go ahead and let you unmute and ask your question to Rebecca.
Good morning, Rebecca. Thank you for this.
Hey.
It's been fabulous.
Good.
I'm sure a lot of our folks at NRCA have been through this type of training before. I'm kind of on the admin side, so haven't had that experience. But just as our management group had sat down a couple of weeks ago and said, the health of our staff as well as our clients is something we're super concerned about. So do you know of any existing virtual trainings that are out there that we could provide with our staff, or are there presenters like yourself that would be willing to come and do some more remote training?
Yeah, I mean, I know, yeah, for sure. I would be more than happy to come and help train anybody who would like the trainings. So you guys just can let us know dates and times and we can set up something like this. I don't know necessarily off the top of my head any already pre-created trainings, but I can definitely look into that and see if I can add that to a resource list if I come across some, because I'm sure there's some out there. I'm just not necessarily familiar with them, but I'd be more than happy to come and do trainings for anybody who would like them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Other questions that folks have for Rebecca? These are all really good questions. Keep thinking of that while I move through our slides here again. Additional questions that folks have? Okay, well, Rebecca, I can't thank you enough. Every time I've seen you speak, I always learn something new. Even if it's the same content, I still learn something new. So thank you so much. You just do a wonderful job, and I just
You're welcome.
When you presented at something, but want to say it again, we're so lucky to have you in this community and NRVCS. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
We've got one question that came up. Hold on.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yep. So suggestions for the elderly at home, particularly those that are watching the news, that are isolated. Thoughts there?
So I would see if you can find ways to engage with them, or if there are people who who can take time out to engage. Maybe church groups that have people who can do phone calls to check in with them on a daily basis. Maybe sending them craft things, or asking them about hobbies or things that they like to do, helping them to create some structure and some things in their life. Pictures, even doing drive-by visits, like if they can't have people come in, going, you see all the pictures of people going to windows and waving and bringing food and things like that. I think those types of things can be really helpful, just to let people know that they're not alone. And offering, if you know people that can help do grocery runs for them, or offering to do other things to be helpful to them. and if they are having a lot of fear and you do see patterns, developing, or maybe they are having difficulty with mental health, seeing if you can help link them in with a counselor or somebody that they can talk to, because that is a very real fear and concern for them and their health and safety. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thanks. Okay. Well, thank you again, Rebecca. That was super helpful.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go ahead and kind of just a couple things, folks, as we wrap up here. Recordings of all of our sessions are on the Community Foundation's resources page under COVID-19. So you can access that through our homepage, as well as under our partnerships and initiatives. And so you can see recordings of this. I'll upload this recording as well as the PowerPoint, so you have access to those links. And then, as Rebecca said, she's going to be sending along a resource list to me, which I'll also upload. We are going to go back to doing these once a month. As you know, and as things kind of started up with COVID, we decided to do these every 2 weeks. We're going to try to transition back towards our typical third Thursday schedule, and so that way we'll be able to offer, continuing remotely, some additional trainings. And so if you have ideas, kind of skipping down to that last bullet, if there are certain things that you would like to hear about, whether it be topics like this one around mental and emotional health, broader public topics, I would say, or things that are really specific to nonprofits like we had last time on fundraising during COVID-19. If you would just let us know. We do have, again, on that COVID page, a link that you can fill out a quick form to talk about what you're seeing and topics you'd like to hear about, or of course you can email the foundation as well. And then finally, we are continuing to send out via a variety of different emails and things we have on our website, a request for folks to fill in a resource list that we're creating. We really want to get a sense from nonprofits of what you're seeing, how are you operating right now, what services are you offering, and are you doing so remotely, in person, by appointment, for example. And then also, do you have certain volunteer, in-kind, or financial needs, and how can people get that to you? Our hope is to kind of have a regular list updated that we'll post to our website and share with a variety of different stakeholders that we have and just broadly in the community, so that we can share the needs that you all have. So again, I'll post all this information, and that way you'll have access to each of these links, and these are also on the Foundation's website. But just stay tuned for more information about our June training, and keep in touch with us if there are certain things that you want to hear about, or types of topics or ideas, great sessions that you've heard in other contexts that we should be doing here as well. So any final comments or questions from the group? Does not appear so. All right, well, thank you all so much for taking the time to be with us today. And thank you again, Rebecca, for a fantastic session.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, well, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we'll see you back here next month. Bye-bye, everybody.